Picture this. A young man stands in the middle of an empty practice field, completely alone, wearing a San Francisco 49ers jersey that no longer means anything to him. The lights are off. The stadium is silent. Somewhere across the country, in Washington, a quarterback who used to be his teammate, his friend, his brother from college, has just unfollowed him online. And somewhere in a front office building, executives are quietly calculating how many millions of dollars they can take back from him. This is not a man at the peak of his career. This is a man who might have just thrown away everything he built, one bitter social media post at a time. And the wildest part? He doesn't even seem to realize it yet. Or maybe he does, and he simply doesn't care anymore. Let's go back to the beginning, because to understand how a former Super Bowl receiver ended up here, exiled, unpaid, and furious, you have to understand who Brandon Aiyuk used to be. Rewind the clock. It's the spring of 2020. The NFL draft is happening, but it's not happening the way it normally does. There's no big stage, no roaring crowd, no bright lights in Las Vegas. The world is locked inside because of a pandemic, and the draft has been forced into people's living rooms. Coaches are picking players from home offices and basements, wearing headsets next to family photos and bookshelves. It's strange. It's historic. And in the middle of that strange, historic night, the San Francisco 49ers use their first-round pick, the 25th selection overall, on a wide receiver most casual fans hadn't heard much about. His name is Brandon Aiyuk, out of Arizona State University. Aiyuk wasn't the kind of prospect who had been famous since high school. He didn't come from a powerhouse program with years of hype behind him. He had transferred around, bounced through junior college, and clawed his way up level by level until he landed at Arizona State, where he finally broke out in a big way. He was explosive. He was elusive. He had this rare ability to turn a short pass into a house call, weaving through defenders like he could see the field a half second before everyone else. Scouts loved his speed. They loved his hands. But more than anything, they loved how dangerous he was after the catch. Give Brandon Aiyuk a football in open space, and something special could happen. When the 49ers picked him, it made sense on paper. San Francisco already had a run-heavy, play-action offense built around deception, misdirection, and yards after catch. Head coach Kyle Shanahan is famous, maybe more famous than almost any coach in the league, for scheming players open and then trusting them to do damage once the ball is in their hands. Aiyuk looked like the exact kind of weapon that offense was built for. And from almost the very first moment he stepped onto an NFL field, that fit showed. He turned short passes into long gains. He made defenders miss in the open field like it was nothing. Fans in the Bay Area fell in love with him fast. But like so many good stories, this one didn't move in a straight line. There were injuries early. There were growing pains. There were moments where it looked like Aiyuk might just be a solid role player instead of a true difference maker. And then came the 2023 season, and everything changed. If you want to understand the peak of Brandon Aiyuk's career, this is the season to watch. Everything clicked. San Francisco's offense was humming. Quarterback Brock Purdy was thriving in his first full year as a starter, and Aiyuk became one of the most dangerous and reliable weapons in the entire league. He finished that season with 75 catches, over 1,300 yards, and 7 touchdowns. He was electric on tape, the kind of receiver who could take a simple slant route and turn it into a 40-yard gain because nobody in the secondary could get him on the ground. By the end of the year, he had earned second-team All-Pro honors, a real recognition that he belonged in the conversation with the best receivers in football. And the story got even bigger because that 49ers team didn't just have a good season. They made a run all the way to the Super Bowl. Picture the confetti, the bright lights, the roar of the crowd, the entire football world watching. San Francisco came agonizingly close to winning it all that year, falling in overtime in one of the most dramatic championship games in recent memory. It was heartbreaking for the franchise, but for Brandon Aiyuk personally, it was proof. Proof that he was one of the best in the league. Proof that the 49ers had found something special when they drafted him. Proof that his best years were still ahead of him. So naturally, the next question became money. Aiyuk was entering the final stretch of his rookie contract, and after a season like that, he knew exactly what he was worth. This is where the first real cracks in the relationship began to form. Cracks that most fans didn't even notice at the time, because they were happy the story ended well. Contract negotiations dragged. They dragged through the offseason. They dragged into training camp. There were even reports swirling that Aiyuk could be traded, with rumors connecting him to teams like the Pittsburgh Steelers, who reportedly worked out a trade agreement in principle before San Francisco pulled things back at the last moment and decided to keep him instead. And the story got even bigger, because that 49ers team didn't just have a good season. They made a run all the way to the Super Bowl. Picture the confetti, the bright lights, the roar of the crowd, the entire football world watching. San Francisco came agonizingly close to winning it all that year, falling in overtime in one of the most dramatic championship games in recent memory. It was heartbreaking for the franchise, but for Brandon Aiyuk personally, it was proof. Proof that he was one of the best in the league. Proof that the 49ers had found something special when they drafted him. Proof that his best years were still ahead of him. So naturally, the next question became money. Aiyuk was entering the final stretch of his rookie contract, and after a season like that, he knew exactly what he was worth. This is where the first real cracks in the relationship began to form. Cracks that most fans didn't even notice at the time because they were happy the story ended well. Contract negotiations dragged. They dragged through the offseason. They dragged into training camp. There were even reports swirling that Aiyuk could be traded, with rumors connecting him to teams like the Pittsburgh Steelers, who reportedly worked out a trade agreement in principle before San Francisco pulled things back at the last moment and decided to keep him instead. In the end, cooler heads prevailed, or so it seemed. The 49ers and Aiyuk agreed to a massive new contract. For years, $120 million. It was a landmark deal, a signal that San Francisco viewed him as a foundational piece of their offense for years to come. Picture the headlines. Picture Aiyuk's smile in the press conference, thanking the organization, talking about building a future in the Bay Area. On the surface, it looked like a storybook ending. A young receiver who had clawed his way up from junior college to a first-round pick, to a Super Bowl run, to a life-changing contract. It felt like the beginning of something great. It was actually the beginning of the end. Just weeks into that very same season, in Week 7, disaster struck. Brandon Aiyuk went down with a devastating knee injury, a torn ACL and MCL in his right knee. If you know anything about football injuries, you know how serious that combination is. It's not just one ligament. It's two torn together, the kind of injury that can end seasons and sometimes threaten entire careers. The kind of injury that requires months and months of grueling rehabilitation, painful workouts, careful monitoring, and enormous mental discipline just to get back onto the field at all, let alone get back to all-pro form. Picture the moment it happened. The play develops, Aiyuk goes down awkwardly, and immediately you can see it in his body language, in the way he grabs at his knee, in the way trainers rush onto the field. Every football fan has seen that moment before with other players, and they know instantly what it usually means. Season over. And for Brandon Aiyuk, that's exactly what it was. His remarkable, record-setting contract year had barely even begun, and now he was staring down a long and lonely road of recovery, all while the huge new contract he had just signed loomed over everything. This is where the story takes its first truly dark turn, because what should have been a difficult but manageable rehab process instead became the spark that lit an entire firestorm. According to the 49ers, Brandon Aiyuk did not fully participate in his scheduled rehabilitation program during the following offseason. Rehab isn't just something players do for show. For a serious knee injury like this, it is often the single most important factor in whether a player ever returns to form, or returns at all. Teams build detailed plans, working closely with medical staff, tracking progress, pushing players through the grueling stages of recovery. When a player doesn't fully engage with that plan, it puts everything at risk, not just his return date, but his entire career trajectory. San Francisco's front office said Aiyuk didn't hold up his end of that process. And because of specific language written into his mega contract, contracts at this level often include conditions tied to conduct, participation, and cooperation with team programs, the 49ers made a stunning decision. They voided the remaining guaranteed money in his deal. Not renegotiated it. Not delayed it. Voided it. Wiped away. Here's where things get even messier, because this decision wasn't announced right away. According to reporting, the choice to void Aiyuk's guarantees was actually made back in July, quietly, internally. But the public, the media, and the fans didn't learn about it until months later, in November. That gap between when the decision was made and when it became public knowledge would later become one of the most contentious points in the entire saga. A gap that Aiyuk himself would eventually seize on as evidence that the organization had been dishonest with him and with the fanbase. Head coach Kyle Shanahan was later asked directly about this timeline. He confirmed that he had learned about the situation back in July and had dealt with it at that time internally. But he also said something important, something that hints at how complicated this entire relationship had become behind closed doors. He said that to him, the contract details and the guarantees were separate from his relationship with Aiyuk as a player and as a person, and separate from what the team was trying to accomplish that season. In other words, Shanahan tried to keep those two things apart, the business side and the human side. He said he had talked with Aiyuk plenty about the situation back in July, but that since then, his focus had shifted entirely to hoping Aiyuk could get healthy and eventually return to the field. He said he had simply been waiting for that day to come. But that day never came. Not that season. Not the next one either. Through the entire 2025 season, Brandon Aiyuk remained sidelined. He never suited up. He never played a single snap. Publicly, both Shanahan and General Manager John Lynch continued to say the door was open, that they hoped and expected Aiyuk would return once he was fully healthy. It was the kind of optimistic, diplomatic language teams use all the time, especially with a player they've invested $120 million in. Keep the door open. Stay patient. Let the healing process play out. But behind the scenes, according to Aiyuk's own later statements, something very different was happening. Aiyuk would eventually claim that he had actually informed the team much earlier, allegedly all the way back before the 2025 season even began, that he had no intention of returning to play for the 49ers. If that's true, it means that while Shanahan and Lynch were publicly expressing hope and patience, Aiyuk had already privately decided the relationship was over. It means an entire season passed with the front office publicly projecting optimism about a return that, according to Aiyuk, was never actually going to happen. That's the kind of gap between public narrative and private reality that turns a simple injury story into a full-blown organizational crisis. Now let's fast forward again, because this is where the story truly explodes into the open, where it stops being a quiet, behind-the-scenes disagreement and becomes a very public, very messy spectacle playing out in real time on social media for the entire football world to watch. It's the summer of 2026. Training camp is approaching. Teams across the league are preparing for a new season, cutting rosters, finalizing depth charts, building excitement for the year ahead. And Brandon Aiyuk is nowhere near the 49ers facility. Instead, he's been unusually active online, posting statements, accusations, and grievances directly to his followers, bypassing the media entirely and telling his side of the story in his own words, on his own terms. Let's talk about exactly where things stand, because the situation is almost absurdly tangled. In the NFL, when a player is placed on what's called the reserve/left squad list, it essentially means the team acknowledges the player has left the team without permission, and the team is not required to pay him, and doesn't have to count him against their salary cap. But here's the twist. In order for a player on that list to become a free agent and sign with another team, he has to take a very specific series of steps first. Step 1. He has to formally file a petition with the league office requesting reinstatement from that list. Step 2. Once reinstated, he actually has to report back to his original team, in this case, the 49ers, and show up for training camp. Only then, once he's officially back under contract and has reported, does the team typically have the option to release him outright, which is usually when a player like this becomes a true free agent, able to sign wherever he wants. It's a strange, almost paradoxical system. To leave a team you refuse to work with, you first have to go back to that team. And Brandon Aiyuk has made it abundantly, defiantly clear that he will not be doing that. In a striking Instagram story, not even a video, just a plain written statement, Aiyuk declared that he will not be reinstating with the organization, and that he will never conduct any kind of business with them again, ever. He said he remains focused and locked in on his goal of returning to play football somewhere, sometime this season, just not in San Francisco. He ended the post with a hashtag referencing his old college slogan, a small, almost defiant nod to his roots at Arizona State, even as he was actively trying to burn down his relationship with the franchise that drafted him. Think about what that actually means, practically speaking. By refusing to file for reinstatement, Aiyuk is essentially trapping himself in limbo. He can't officially become a free agent. He can't sign with another team. He can't collect the massive salary tied to his current contract, because he's not on the active roster and isn't fulfilling any of the requirements to be paid. He is, in a very real sense, choosing to sit in career purgatory rather than take the one clear, established path back to the football field. It's a stance built entirely on principle and anger, and it's costing him everything, financially and professionally, in the process. And it doesn't stop there. In a separate, even more pointed post, Aiyuk went further, directly accusing the 49ers of lying, not just to him, but to the media and to the entire fanbase, about the timeline of when his guarantees were voided. He claimed the team continued acting publicly as if the decision hadn't already been made back in July, even after the news eventually broke in November. He framed it as a deliberate deception, a cover-up designed to protect the team's image while quietly stripping him of the guaranteed money he'd been promised. Now here's where things get genuinely uncomfortable, because when reporters and analysts actually dug into that specific claim, checking it against Kyle Shanahan's own public comments from earlier in the year, the accusation didn't hold up particularly well. Shanahan had already gone on record, well before Aiyuk's post, openly stating that he'd learned about the situation back in July and had addressed it at the time. That's not exactly hiding something. In fact, multiple football analysts and reporters covering the story pointed out that Aiyuk's central claim, that the team was actively lying about the timeline, appeared to be factually inaccurate based on Shanahan's own prior public statements. It's a small but telling detail, because it suggests this saga isn't simply about a wronged player standing up against a cold corporate franchise. It's messier than that. It's two sides, each with their own version of events. And at least on this particular point, the public record seems to lean away from Aiyuk's version. But Aiyuk didn't stop at accusations about the front office. He also brought receipts, or at least what he claimed were receipts, regarding his actual rehab progress. He stated that he had reached certain performance and recovery markers earlier than expected during his rehabilitation timeline. And he pointed out that the team itself has footage and GPS tracking data from the periods he spent at the facility that would supposedly prove this. It's a fascinating claim, because it flips the entire narrative on its head. Instead of a player who blew off his rehab and abandoned his responsibilities, Aiyuk is painting a picture of a player who actually outperformed expectations physically, but who chose, for personal and relational reasons, to walk away from the organization anyway. Now let's talk about where Brandon Aiyuk actually wants to go, because this part of the story has its own twist, and it might be the most painfully ironic part of the entire saga. For much of this offseason, Aiyuk made no secret of his desired destination. He repeatedly and publicly expressed a strong interest in eventually signing with the Washington Commanders. And the reason wasn't just about scheme fit or opportunity. It was personal. Washington's franchise quarterback is Jayden Daniels, a dynamic young playmaker who happened to be Aiyuk's teammate back at Arizona State University. These two didn't just play together in college. They had a real relationship, a bond built through the shared grind of college football, through years of practices and games and locker rooms long before either of them made it to the NFL. Aiyuk clearly imagined a storybook reunion. Two Arizona State guys, one a rising star quarterback, the other a former All-Pro receiver looking for a fresh start, teaming up again to torch NFL defenses together. For a while, that dream seemed like it might actually have some real momentum behind it. There was buzz. There was speculation. Reporters and fans started connecting the dots, imagining what a Aiyuk to Washington signing might look like once the 49ers finally let him go. And then, seemingly out of nowhere, it all fell apart. Publicly, loudly, painfully. Somewhere along the way, something shifted between Aiyuk and Jayden Daniels. The two stopped following each other on social media, a small digital gesture, but one that carries real weight in a world where public perception often gets measured in follows and unfollows. Then things escalated even further. Aiyuk posted something directed right at his old friend, calling out Jayden Daniels in a strikingly harsh and personal tone. He essentially told Daniels that if he was going to be on his team, he needed to follow certain rules, and he made a pointed, almost mocking remark suggesting Daniels needed to stop running back to his mother for support before Aiyuk would start believing whatever Daniels had apparently said about him. Picture that for a second. Two former college teammates, guys who once trusted each other enough to build a friendship through the chaos of major college football, now trading public jabs online, with one essentially mocking the other's relationship with his own mom. It's ugly. It's the kind of moment that makes you wince as an outside observer, because you can feel just how personal and painful this falling out clearly became. And here's the truly tragic irony buried inside all of it. Washington's interest in Aiyuk, which had already been lukewarm at best given his injury history and the uncertainty around his mental and physical readiness, reportedly cooled even further as this public feud with their own franchise quarterback played out. Think about that. Aiyuk's dream landing spot, built entirely around reuniting with an old friend, may have been sabotaged, at least in part, by Aiyuk's own public conflict with that very same friend. He didn't just burn his bridge with the 49ers. In the process of trying to burn that bridge in the most public, defiant way possible, he may have also burned the bridge to the one team that represented his best remaining path back onto an NFL field. One prominent Bay Area columnist summed up the entire situation in a particularly brutal way, painting a picture of the 49ers essentially watching from a distance with a kind of weary, knowing patience, as if they'd seen this coming the entire time. The column suggested the 49ers had every reason to simply wait Aiyuk out, to let him sit on that reserve list indefinitely, because doing so cost them almost nothing. He didn't count against their salary cap. He wasn't taking up a meaningful roster spot in any practical sense. Meanwhile, every single day that passed with Aiyuk refusing to file for reinstatement was another day where he was actively damaging his own market value, and now, apparently, actively damaging his relationships with the very people who might have helped him land somewhere new. The columnist even floated a genuinely startling possibility, one that would have seemed almost unthinkable just a couple of years earlier, when Aiyuk was catching passes in a Super Bowl. The possibility that if the 49ers eventually do release him, and if Washington truly has lost interest after everything that unfolded with Jaden Daniels, Brandon Aiyuk might not land anywhere at all. He might simply fade out of the league altogether, not because of a lack of talent. Talent was never really the question here, but because of everything else. The unresolved conflict, the burned bridges, the public perception of a player who seems more interested in fighting battles online than getting back on the football field. And then there's the money. Let's talk about the money, because this part of the story is almost as dramatic as the emotional fallout, and it adds a brutal financial dimension to everything that's. Think about the scale of that number. $18.4 million. That's not a fine. That's not a minor deduction. That's a franchise actively pursuing legal and financial mechanisms to reclaim tens of millions of dollars from a player they once viewed as a foundational piece of their offense. One respected NBC Sports Bay Area insider put it in particularly blunt terms, essentially describing the entire situation as an incredible, almost unbelievable gift that Aiyuk had handed the 49ers. By failing to fulfill the terms of his contract and effectively defaulting on his obligations after the injury, Aiyuk had given the organization a clean, justified, financially devastating exit ramp, one that let them walk away from a massive contract on a player who was no longer performing, without having to pay out the full guaranteed money they'd originally promised. And it gets even more precarious for Aiyuk personally, beyond just the money. According to reports, he currently doesn't even have formal representation. No agent actively fighting on his behalf in these negotiations, at least not according to Aiyuk's own public statements. Think about what that means in a moment like this. A player entangled in one of the messiest, most financially significant disputes in the league, choosing to fight it out largely on his own, through Instagram posts, without the kind of experienced professional guidance that typically helps players navigate exactly these kinds of high-stakes, high-pressure situations. It's a stunning decision, whether born out of stubbornness, distrust, financial necessity, or some combination of all three. Now, let's step back and ask the real question hanging over this entire saga. What happens next? Where does this actually go from here? As things stand right now, heading into the heart of the 2026 offseason, Brandon Aiyuk remains stuck. He's still technically on the 49ers roster in a paperwork sense, sitting on that reserve/left squad list, unpaid, unplayed, and increasingly isolated. Training camp is approaching fast for every team in the league, including San Francisco. And Aiyuk has stated, clearly and repeatedly, that he will not be there. He's essentially betting everything on a standoff, hoping that at some point, the 49ers will simply choose to release him outright without requiring him to go through the formal reinstatement and reporting process. But from the team's perspective, why would they ever do that? There's no real incentive. He doesn't cost them anything on the cap. He's not occupying a spot they desperately need for someone else. Every single day that Aiyuk refuses to engage with the proper process is, from San Francisco's point of view, a day that costs them nothing and potentially saves them millions. Meanwhile, the clock keeps ticking on Aiyuk's actual football career. He's 28 years old, an age where receivers can still absolutely play at an elite level, but an age where every missed season matters more, where teams start to wonder about durability, about attitude, about whether a player is worth the risk and the headache. Every month that passes without him on an NFL field is a month where his value, his conditioning, his game reps, and quite frankly, his reputation around the league continue to erode. And here's the thing that makes this entire story so genuinely tragic when you really sit with it. This isn't a story about a lack of talent. Brandon Aiyuk is not some fringe player scratching to hold onto a roster spot. This is a man who, just a few short years ago, was a second-team All-Pro receiver on a Super Bowl team. A former first-round pick who fully lived up to his draft billing, and then some. He had speed, elusiveness, incredible hands, and a real chemistry with one of the more explosive offensive systems in modern football. On pure ability alone, there's no question he could still be a difference maker on almost any roster in the league today. But football, at the highest level, has never been just about talent. It's about trust. It's about relationships. It's about an organization believing they can build around you, invest in you, and count on you when it matters. And piece by piece, post by post, Brandon Aiyuk appears to be dismantling every single one of those things. He's burned his relationship with the team that drafted him and paid him $120 million. He's seemingly damaged, at least publicly, his relationship with the one other franchise that represented his most realistic path forward. And he's done it, remarkably, by feuding with his own former college teammate, the very person who was supposed to be the reason that new opportunity even existed in the first place. Some football fans and analysts see this as a cautionary tale about pride, about letting anger and hurt feelings override strategic decision-making, about a player so consumed by feeling wronged that he's willing to sacrifice his own career just to make a point. Others see it very differently, as a story about a player standing on principle, refusing to quietly go along with a process he genuinely believes was dishonest and unfair, even if that stance costs him everything financially. The truth, as it so often does in situations this complicated, probably lives somewhere in the messy space between those two extremes. Some football fans and analysts see this as a cautionary tale about pride, about letting anger and hurt feelings override strategic decision-making, about a player so consumed by feeling wronged that he's willing to sacrifice his own career just to make a point. Others see it very differently, as a story about a player standing on principle, refusing to quietly go along with a process he genuinely believes was dishonest and unfair, even if that stance costs him everything financially. The truth, as it so often does in situations this complicated, probably lives somewhere in the messy space between those two extremes. What we do know, with real certainty, is this. Brandon Aiyuk once stood on the biggest stage in football, playing in a Super Bowl, catching passes as one of the most dangerous receivers in the entire league. And now, just a couple of years later, he's standing at the edge of football obscurity, locked in a bitter, public standoff with his own team, watching his most promising alternative path quietly evaporate because of a feud with an old friend, all while tens of millions of dollars hang in the balance, threatening to be clawed back before he's even had the chance to sign with anyone else. Whether Brandon Aiyuk ever plays another down in the NFL remains genuinely uncertain. Maybe some team, somewhere, will eventually decide the talent is worth the risk, the baggage, and the drama, and give him one more chance to prove he can still be that dangerous, game-changing receiver from 2023. Maybe the pressure of watching his window slowly close will eventually push him to finally file for that reinstatement, swallow his pride, and take the necessary steps back onto a football field, wherever that field might ultimately be. Or maybe this really is it. Maybe the story of Brandon Aiyuk, former first-round pick, former Super Bowl participant, former All-Pro, simply ends here, not with an injury, not with a decline in skill, but with a self-inflicted collapse built entirely out of broken trust, burned bridges, and a refusal to bend even when bending might have been the only thing standing between him and the end of his career. One thing is certain, the next move belongs entirely to him. And right now, it doesn't look like he's planning on making one anytime soon.